Time for the weather now with Graham Creed, but before we do, we're going to Scott Ludlam, the Greens spokesman. Let's go to Canberra now.
Okay. Well, a short time ago, Communications Minister Malcolm Turnbull confirmed what we've known all along. I think months ago, Prime Minister Abbott decided that the ABC and SBS aren't on Team Australia and that the sharpest way to punish them would be by cutting their funding. They were making threats months ago about editorial decisions and programming decisions made by the ABC at the same time as threatening funding cuts. Minister Turnbull's statement of a short time ago suggesting that Tony Abbott's comments on the eve of the September election that there would be no cuts to the ABC or SBS were taken out of context fails the common sense test. Nobody will believe that. The Prime Minister lied, and now they are coming after the ABC and SBS and the knives are out. It's completely disingenuous to then say this is just for back office operations and administration, as though these two public broadcasters have hundreds of people sitting around doing nothing. They've left it now to the two public broadcasters to decide exactly where the axe will fall. I have no doubt that this will involve programming cuts, and in fact ABC management have been foreshadowing and warning us of that for months. You can't cut $308 million out of broadcasters that already run very, very lean on very tight budgets that had been starved for years under the Howard regime. You can't cut $308 million out of public broadcasters like that without expecting it to impact on programming. And so now what we have is out in the open. The Australian government's ideological war and ideological objection to public broadcasters is out in the open, which means we have to stand up and fight it. If this government has let its loathing of public broadcasting get so far out of hand, then we will have to help elect a government that actually takes a more common sense approach. The ABC and SBS are much loved and they are trusted by people across the country, much more so trusted I should say, than the front bench of this government. Public broadcasting will outlast this government, and now the Greens will be stepping up to help lead the fight with others in this parliament to protect these much-loved public broadcasters. We're also very well aware, and I put this question to the Minister representing Malcolm Turnbull yesterday in question time, that there are allegedly clauses in the Trans-Pacific Partnership that come after state-owned enterprises. What we do not want to see, but we fear may be the case, is that this government is going to hide behind the Trans-Pacific Partnership to come after ABC and the SBS to talk about privatisation or part privatisation. That the ideologues in this government joining this crusade, seeing public broadcasting as some kind of anachronism, will be very strongly fought by the Australian Greens and I think the majority of the Australian population. They're happy to take questions.
Given that some other government departments have also got to face cuts, why should the public broadcasters be exempt?
Most government departments are facing cuts, and it's up to the government to explain why that was necessary. They've been explaining to us for a year that they're facing very tight budget circumstances and a widening budget deficit, and yet they've just spent 12 months abolishing taxes. Why not come after the top end of town? We know the answer is because they're spineless. They're not willing to take on their financial backers in the mining and the oil and gas industries or the financial services industries, as we're seeing the debacle unfolding in here today. And so they're coming after public broadcasting and all other areas of the Commonwealth Public Service. It's absolutely not good enough.
We've got estimates tomorrow. What kind of questions will we have?
We do. So we've got the ABC and SBS will be fronting budget estimates committees late tomorrow, I think from about 8 o'clock. The questions that I've got are to Mr Mark Scott and Mr Abid from SBS will be around exactly how they've modelled the impacts are going to wash through the broadcasters. Let's get on the public record once and for all that this is going to impact services. It's going to impact programming decisions. There's no doubt in my mind, unfortunately now the ugly detail will be put on the table.
How about advertising on SBS? I don't think the government's saying it wants more advertising on SBS. It wants to allow SBS to increase advertising during programs which rate well.
What they're proposing to do, and again they've left it up to Mr Abid and the rest of management, is to allow SBS to shift the amount of advertising and exactly when it falls. And what that is going to look like in practice is for things like the World Cup or the Tour de France, the really high rating, some of the highest rating programs that SBS carry, you'll have 10 minutes of advertising, which means you will be missing some of the live broadcast, and you're going to be missing quite a lot of an event that runs for as long as the Tour de France, for example. You'll be missing the program because they're going to be jamming all their advertising in there. It's not what I think SBS would have preferred. We think it's a slippery slope, taking a public broadcaster and forcing it to rely and have a greater dependence on advertising. We know that the other commercial broadcasters are unhappy with that decision because, of course, that dilutes the value of advertising right across all of the broadcasters. It's precisely the reverse direction in which we should be going.
How do you see the impact on job losses?
We're going to need to wait to see the exact impact on job losses, but we already know from the attacks on the Australia network and the 1% so-called down payment attack on the ABC that already cost jobs. People are already losing their jobs. Good journalists, good administrators are already being shown the door. There's no way you can smash a $308 million hole in an entity the size of the ABC and SBS and not expect job losses. It's tragic. It means a lot of good people are going to be washed out of that organisation. It's an incredibly sad day for public broadcasting, and I can't imagine how the staff and crews at the ABC and SBS must be feeling. It's our job, I think, as the Australian Greens to help lead the fight against the unhinged ideological attacks that have been launched.
It's not actually plausible, is it, that the government's going to use the TPP as a backdoor to privatise the ABC? You're just stringing together two things that you fear and creating this boogeyman.
No, I don't know where you're coming from there. There's reporting, if the Trans-Pacific Partnership draft agreement was in the public domain and wasn't being negotiated in total secrecy, then it would be easier to be definitive. But the fact is there's been reporting for quite some time that there's clauses in the TPP relating to the operation of state-owned enterprises being pushed very heavily by the United States negotiating team. And we know where they're coming from ideologically. They don't think state-owned enterprises should exist. We understand that there's a quarantine list that the Australian government, if they wanted to, could choose to put the ABC and SBS on the list where it would be beyond the reach of the TPP provisions. I hope that that's what they're proposing to do, but of course they wouldn't answer that question when I put it to them in a straightforward manner yesterday. It's up to the government, because they've seen the draft text. If I'm out on a limb, then it's up to the government to explain why we're wrong.
Is that what you're going to be putting up in estimates tomorrow? Another question?
We can put it to estimates tomorrow, but we won't have the trade negotiators at the table. We missed that opportunity. That was a couple of weeks ago. Senator Whish-Wilson has been pursuing this, obviously, for at least, for a year or for 18 months or so. We could put those questions to ABC management, but they're likely to be just as much in the dark.
Given that other broadcasters have to accept fairly large-scale job cuts and have had to rein in costs, why shouldn't the public broadcasters be able to do the same?
The public broadcasters operate on incredibly lean budgets because they were starved practically to death during the years of the Howard regime. We only just saw substantial lifts in triennial funding, more so for the ABC and somewhat for SBS to get it out of intensive care during the latter period of the Rudd-Gillard government. I think what we should expect is that when the Prime Minister looks you in the face the night before the election and says there'll be no cuts, that he's not lying to your face. I think that's what most Australians would have expected.